Hello and welcome. He told America it's all in the family, with an iconic television series that challenged society and all of its quirks. And he continues to campaign and argue for more understanding and tolerance in the USA. This week on 101, meet one of Hollywood's most respected producers, Norman Lear. His early life in New Haven, Connecticut during the Great Depression taught the young Norman Lear the meaning of self-sufficiency. College life was cut short when he enlisted for World War II, ending up performing dozens of bombing runs as a gunner and radio operator. After the war, a short stint as a press agent led Lear into a career in entertainment, and before long he was rubbing shoulders with the stars and building a portfolio in film and television. It was in the early 70s that Norman Lear changed the way America regarded itself through the edgy sitcom All in the Family. And from there, his place in television history was set in stone. Norman Lear, it's a real pleasure to have some time with you.
I'm going to enjoy it, I'm sure, too.
Thank you. Now, you've done so much professionally and privately. It's almost hard to put a label on you. Are you essentially a television and film producer, or are you more an activist and philanthropist now?
I am more a father, husband, uncle, brother, member of the family of man.
But in terms of what you do, you know, President Bill Clinton, the former president of the US, awarded you the National Medal of Arts in 1999, and he said that you've held up a mirror to American society and changed the way we look at it. Now, when you look at where America is in the early part of the 21st century, is it anywhere near where you would have thought it might have gone all those years ago?
Well, is it anywhere near depends on how much time it's going to take us to get back. It doesn't feel like it's here to where I thought we were heading. I think one of the problems, I was in the Second World War. I remember coming out of the war and some years later thinking, this myth which Tom Brokaw made a somewhat reality with The Greatest Generation, you know, that appellation. I'm not at all sure we were this. We couldn't have been the greatest generation, or we'd have done a better job about where we are today, because I think we believed that we were after the war we were God's gift to the world. And I don't think any one country is, or any one system is, or we're all God's gift.
Observations always come from a perspective or an angle. When you look at what is the angle that you look at things from then?
And I think it's probably through the end of the telescope that sees the comedy in life, the foolishness of the human condition. Because underlying just about everything, I may say, that sounds so serious, is some understanding about the basic foolishness of who we think we are as opposed to who we are.
New Haven, Connecticut, in 1922, when you were born, there was a very different place, and of course, as a young boy, you witnessed the Great Depression. What do you remember of that time?
Oh, I remember, I didn't live in New Haven. I was born in New Haven, we lived there for a couple of years, but then came back when I was about 9 years old, lived with my grandparents for a few years, sold football items at the Ale Bowl, on the green in New Haven Friday night, and then Saturday morning at the Ale Bowl. Now ask me what I remember about that, and it's a book, because life was very different then, and men and women arrived in these raccoon coats and whiskey flasks in their pockets, and on the sides of trolley cars where they were hanging off the runway, the runners on the trolley cars. And I was a kid selling little trinkets, footballs and pennants and so forth. And it was a very romantic time.
In spite of all the difficulties, though, that the country was facing in the 30s, was it still a happy time for you?
Well, I was a kid of the Depression. My father went belly up. My uncles went belly up. I had one uncle, my Uncle Jack, who flicked me a cord. There were 6 of them, and 2 on the other side, 8 of them. He flicked me a cord every time he saw me. And that was my role model. Nobody asked me what I wanted to grow up to be. I wanted to grow up to be an uncle who could flip a quarter to a nephew. And so I went into, that's how I got into show business, because he was a press agent. I didn't know what that was at the time, but that's how I started out.
Now, you were raised in a Jewish household, but I know that at an early age you started to question the sort of the authority of religious leaders. What prompted those thoughts?
I don't remember how early I started to, but perhaps when I was a kid and I was listening to Father Coughlin, who was a Catholic priest on radio, viciously anti-Semitic, and crazed. I mean, I kind of, somehow at an early age, I understood it wasn't just because I was Jewish. It was because I was Jewish, because there was a constitution to which I adhered and believed, in which I believed. And religion shouldn't be in politics. And I got that somehow at an early age.
You say your mother kept you humble. How did she do that?
This story will tell it all. I called her one morning some years ago, after I'd gotten a call telling me that, secretly telling me that the Television Academy of Arts and Sciences was going to start a Hall of Fame. Called my mother instantly, which was what I did in those years. And I called her in Bridgeport, Connecticut, got her on the phone and said, "Mom, they're starting a Hall of Fame. And among the first inductees are this one, this one, this one, and me." And her response was, "Listen, if that's what they want to do, who am I to say?" I grew up with that mother. So, you know, my first real paying job that, you know, and I said I was going to make $170 a week. This was in television. And her response was, "Well, when you make $1,000, that's a lot of money."
After high school in Connecticut, you went to Emerson College in Boston. Yes. But you weren't particularly a keen or good student. What was it about academic life that you really didn't connect with?
I went to Emerson College about 8 months.
Yeah, you dropped out.
And the war started, and I enlisted, and so that was it.
Well, so 1942, you're there with the U.S. Army Air Forces. What motivated you to go into that particular, I mean, well, you had to enlist, I guess, but what motivated you to take that particular role?
Off we go into the wild blue yonder. I liked the song. As good a reason as any. I liked what I knew about flying. I wanted to be a pilot. And the crazy thing was that I washed out of pilot training in Savannah, Georgia, or someplace like that, because they told me that my eardrum or something, anyway, but I couldn't fly physically, but they sent me to gunnery school the next week and radio school, and then I went over and I flew as a radio operator and a gunner.
Well, that was in the Mediterranean, and you did 52 combat missions as well. Yeah. How did the war affect you? I mean, sort of emotionally and spiritually, how did it change you?
I don't know. I think, but you know, to be honest, I don't know whether it taught me this instantly or on reflection and other experiences later. But I remember I was the radio operating gunner. I was the closest person to the bomb bay doors. So when we dropped bombs, I was the one who stood up and looked over to be sure all the bombs had cleared the bomb bay and reported to the pilot, who was facing that way. And I remember looking over and watching the bombs drop and joining the tons of others from the planes all around us. And thinking, well, what if it doesn't hit the munitions factory or where we thought we were hitting? What if it's hitting farmland and farms and so forth? And I remember thinking, screw them. I don't care. But landing later and wondering if they asked me to sign a piece of paper that said, go ahead and hit farmhouses, would I ever sign that? And you don't know that kind of thing until you're, you have to decide. So I wondered from that point on, how important, I thought how important it would be for people, to be preached. If there's one lesson we should be preached, is that we are capable of the worst that anybody else is capable of. We are human beings. We have that capacity.
Was it a natural transition from the military into showbiz? Was it an easy transition?
No, the transition came about because of my Uncle Jack. My Uncle Jack, the guy who flipped me a quarter, was a press agent. I wanted to be a press agent. As we were flying our last missions, I found a printer in Foggia, Italy, stood over him, picked letter for letter, and wrote this one page, which I still have, in which I announced that I was getting out of the Army and I wanted to be a press agent. And it was flowery, and I mean, it was a pitch like few pitches. And I did get, I guess because I was a GI about to be discharged after active duty, I got one offer for a job, sight unseen, as a result of the page, and I got one offer for a meeting. I took the job. And that's how, after the war, I worked as a press agent.
Norman Lear, many more questions for you. More one-on-one when we continue in just a moment. Welcome back. You're watching One-on-One. We're speaking with award-winning television and film producer Norman Lear. You actually had a lot of awards in your careers, but which of those accolades has stood out the most in your mind?
I guess the photograph of the president hanging a medal on me, that was, I suppose the fact of the photograph makes that live more in my mind.
And of course, your career involved a lot of, a lot of pioneering work. Your television series were quite unusual in a way that you did them almost as stage plays with a live audience, yes. and you used video instead of film, which was also a little unusual at that time as well. What did you have in mind as you were putting those together? What were you wanting?
I thought we were doing one-act plays, and no laugh track. We never used a laugh track. We had to use some mechanical laughter if we were making big cuts and so forth, just to smooth out the track. But we had 360 seats, and they were, always filled. So that's who we did the show for. If we couldn't make those people laugh. And we did 2 shows. We did one at 5 and one at 8. So, and they were only a half hour. So if we got something wrong, didn't get the laugh we expected in the first show, we tried to fix it for the second.
Now your show, All in the Family, was a very iconic series, and actually was considered one that changed the way America thought. It really affected America, even relieved ethnic tensions, I gather, at one point. What sort of feedback did you get on that show as it started to gain some traction?
Well, the only feedback the only thing I thought we accomplished for sure was that people talked about it afterwards, because all the mail through all the years, I learned that the show was over and the family sat and talked and argued and so forth. But I've often been asked if I thought, and the question suggests that maybe I changed, or the show changed people, or the culture. And if a couple of thousand years of the Judeo-Christian ethic didn't change attitudes about people and people against people, I hardly think my half-hour situation comedy was going to do that.
Although it was phenomenally
But it did get them to talk. I had evidence of that, and so my grandfather once told me, throw a rock in the lake, Norman, you're going to get the level of the water to rise. So as a kid, I would throw rocks and looking to see if the water was rising. And at one point he said, you will never see it rise, but you get the ripple. So the ripple for me was people talked.
You also made a couple of movies, both featuring Dick Van Dyke. There was American Divorce in 1967, which was nominated for an Academy Award, and Cold Turkey in 1971. How did you find working with the big screen as opposed to television?
Well, the big screen, you furnish something and you can make love to it in the editing room for months. The little screen, you finish it, you can make love to it for 20 minutes and it's gone. The joy for the little screen is that you're going to share it with a few million people instantly, practically, and the other is going to take a long time, and you don't know how many people are going to see it, but you can take the time to get it as good as you can get it.
It's easy when talking about all your TV work to forget that actually a big part of your life has been the activism and your efforts to try to have a positive impact on society. At what point did you start to take on board some of the activism?
I'd always been involved. You know, I remember between marriages once in Las Vegas, driving people to the polls and that kind of activity. But I probably got more active as I was able to use money to affect, either to donate or to do something myself that would help.
It's amazing. You registered 4 million new young voters in the 2004 presidential election.
Yeah, well, I bought a copy of the Declaration of Independence. Strange to, even as I say it,
$8.1 million too. Huh? A lot of money. $8.1 million, was it?
Yeah, it was. Sotheby's was selling it on the internet. First time anything like that had ever happened. That interested me, and I followed that. The course of the day when it was being auctioned off. I had seen it because it was in on the floor of Sotheby's hall, their offices here, and went over on my lunch hour to look at it, and just found myself. I looked over to see my associate was crying because I didn't want to see I was crying, and I knew walking out of there, I wouldn't buy such an item to hang it on a wall or anything. I wanted it to travel and share it because I thought instantly, this is the birth certificate, because this is one of the few copies printed the night of July 4th, 1776. It was weeks and weeks later before the one that we're familiar with was signed. This was the night of. So it's traveled ever since.
You took it on the road, on a road trip?
Oh yeah, it's still out there.
You also spent a lot of time exploring spirituality and the meaning of faith as well. At what point did that, I mean, I know you had the early years that we talked about with listening to these religious leaders, but at what point did you really start to look for some kind of spiritual answers? And did you find anything?
Before I met my wife, my current wife, and I had never talked much about, I'd never been with anybody where spirituality and the life and the meaning of life and, what's it all about, Alfie? All these questions never came up. And it did with Lynn Lear, my wife of now 22 years. And it was, I realized when I go back and look at my work, I was always deeply spiritual. Never thought about it per se.
Any real regrets? Anything you would turn the clock back on? No, not because, if I was smart enough, I wouldn't regret an awful lot of things. But it's not the way I live my life. It's not the way I think I would wish my kids to live their lives. Whoever said, this is the first day of the rest of my life, I pull it back to the first moment. This next moment. This exchange. I'm looking you in the eye. You are looking me in the eye. If I am conscious of that, I know I've had a terrific moment. That's as good as it gets. I have to remember that every morning when I wake up with my kids. It isn't just make them breakfast, take them to them. It's catching that moment and feeling good. I mean, remembering to pat myself on the back and say, yeah, got it. That's where success is. Now, is there anything on your list that's outstanding you've been wanting to get done and just haven't had a chance to do yet?
Oh, there's too many days every day. I haven't had a chance to do tomorrow yet. But Stand By Me. And what's happened to me as a result of Stand By Me. And a message to talk to Jazeera about this is heaven. I've come to understand the power of music and the arts And I find myself introducing the band, because now it's a band, they're traveling everywhere. I don't know how many tens of millions have seen Stand By Me and all the other songs in the Playing for Change label. But I watch these multi-ethnic and ages and so forth, audiences everywhere, so transfixed. And I've come to think that if the world is to be saved, and there is nobody hearing my voice that doesn't believe the world has to be saved in their own ways, however they may think of it. And I believe it will. I don't want to wake up in the morning, I don't have that hope. But it's going to be, the door will be opened by the arts. The door will be opened by that which brings us all together. Music is paramount among them. And then the policy and the politician will walk through it. But it's going to be this that brings us together.
How would you like people to remember you? What would you like your legacy to be?
He felt he mattered, and he did. No, that's not. We all matter. If I could help people understand, they all matter. My sister in Connecticut doesn't wish to write the letter to the mayor because she's not Norman Lear where it would matter. She's only Claire Lear. And I tell her, but if you appreciate the creator's enterprise here, that this be one planet among a billion, in a universe of which there may be a billion universes, then can you measure the distance between how much any two of us matter? You know, between me and Jonas Salk, or Jonas Salk and Caesar, between any two of us, you can't measure the distance. We matter. I believe in the butterfly effect for human beings. We matter.
So what would people say about you? What would you like them to say?
He mattered.
Norman Lear, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate that.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
sir.
You're welcome.